let you know, since Ryan and Tara, you brought up a great point that you didn't know too much about NLC. You'll learn a lot about what the experience itself is like. And I'll talk a bit about my experience too throughout. But NLC markets itself as really the hub for millennials who are interested in progressive thought leadership. And there is a national network. There are chapters in almost every state. And there are city-based chapters in some of the more urban areas as well that have sought out to create a network of younger progressives who are looking to make progressive, positive change in their communities. And that takes a lot of different shapes. So as you heard from a few people, and you'll hear more from our speakers in a few minutes, that can mean running for office, forming your own campaign, figuring out an issue that you want to fundraise for and get behind, and then figure out how to organize and make that work as a success story in your own community. But it can also take the form of just a lot of introspective reflection and figuring out how you fit within your community to make the most effective progressive that you can. And I'll briefly just say, I'm not involved directly in politics. Now I dabble and support different people and help with campaigns that I'm passionate about. But realistically for me, I'm an educator. I really, really care about making sure that access to education is equitable, that we have a focus on diversity and inclusion in the work that I do. And when I went into NLC, and again, I'm verbose, so I'll try and be brief and then let our panelists speak. But it really was a focus for me about figuring out how I could be the best educator I was. And we don't have every industry represented here tonight, but in NLC, we really do have every industry represented. We have folks from the corporate world, from the tech sector who are looking to make those spaces more equitable. We have artists who are looking to make a change in the world that they want to represent and have done really cool work actually right here in New Hampshire. And New Hampshire itself has a really excellent chapter, not just the active alumni who are here tonight, but we have a pretty cool network of people who are from these different walks of life: activists, nonprofit organizers, campaign managers, elected officials, and then folks who are working out in their industry like me. So you're going to get to hear a little bit about the diverse stories from those folks tonight. I'm going to pass the ball to our first speaker, and if she doesn't mind me volunteering her to go first, I'm going to ask Josie.
Kind of saw that coming, Dan. Hey, no worries. Sure. Do you want me to just give my little spiel and then people can ask questions?
Yeah, tell us about your experience, what you were looking for when you came to NLC, and what the experience in the Institute was like that has then led to some of the opportunities you've had since graduating the fellowship.
Cool. So like I said, I'm Josie. I'm 24. I'm living in Dover, just moved here from Concord. And I originally moved up here to New Hampshire 3 years ago when I took a job with Planned Parenthood New Hampshire Action Fund. During my time there, I heard about NLC constantly. And I didn't really know what this acronym was. I just kind of heard people talking about it. And not only were two of my coworkers NLC alum, but some of our top leaders, Sierra and Kim, were in NLC at the time I was working there. So I just kind of, heard about it as this thing I had to do if I wanted an awesome network and lasting relationships. And just really came away from that being wow, I really got to do this NLC thing, I guess. So thanks, Sierra, for that. Like I said, I was in the class of 2019. So right when my job at Planned Parenthood was ending, I started NLC, and that was the most perfect timing possible for me because I really didn't have a clear vision of what was going to come next. I moved to this state I didn't know much about for a specific job, and I didn't have that specific job anymore, but I knew I wanted to stay, and also I was in a lease. So what choice did I have? I was staying in New Hampshire. And at that time, I honestly wasn't obsessed with New Hampshire. I didn't know if this was going to be my home. And I think NLC really helped solidify that for me because it showed me that I could have this awesome network of people who were like me, super passionate about this stuff all across the state. And it really helped me build some of these really foundational relationships that are a huge part of my life right now. So right at the same time that I started NLC. I took a part-time job with a group called New Hampshire Youth Movement. They were working on passing legislation and supporting candidates who are really strong on climate and student debt and healthcare, and on the forefront of the fight against the student voting rights. When college students' voting rights were under attack, they were like right at the forefront of that fight. And I knew I really wanted to get involved in all that. So yeah, it was just like a perfect fit there. And we've grown a lot as an organization since. I currently work full-time with them as their political director, and I think NLC really helped me feel ready to step into that role, and it really gave me a network that I could rely on to help me learn what I needed to stepping into that role. And yeah, the people in my class, like Dan, became really close friends. I work alongside of a lot of them right now in a lot of different capacities. And lastly, just wanted to mention that like my capstone with NLC has become like the hugest part of my life. I came in with the idea to start an abortion fund in New Hampshire, but didn't really know where to go. I just kind of kept telling people that I wanted to do this. And with enough push from my NLC class, I like started having real meetings and taking that dream seriously. I recruited someone from my NLC class to do our comms. Her name is Steph. And I asked my other like people in my cohort about their experiences starting nonprofits, like how much work would it be, the legal stuff behind it. I just really like relied on my class and people to teach me what I needed to do it. And I'm happy to announce it's been a year now since we first started meeting, and we are only $10,000 away from officially launching. So it's been a long process, but yeah, really couldn't have done it without NLC. And hopefully in the next few months, New Hampshire will have its only abortion fund. And for those that don't know, we're one of the only states in the entire country that doesn't have a dedicated abortion fund. It's a huge need here because Massachusetts gets all the New Hampshire calls and they're kind of salty about it. So it's beyond time for us to have one. And yeah, I think it just really fits my network and past experiences. And yeah, honestly don't know if I would have taken that plunge without my time at NLC. So that's kind of what I wanted to say. Y'all should definitely do NLC. It's great. Yeah.
Josie, hearing you talk about, so New Hampshire's first and only abortion fund.
Yeah.
And like, I was hoping you'd bring up your capstone because I literally have like tingles. I wanted an update. So that's like really, really cool and exciting work. I want to take a moment and without stealing anybody else's thunder, just to talk about the capstone, because that is an element of if you've applied or started to look at the application, you might have thought about what your capstone may be. But if you haven't, that's okay. The capstone is a feature of the Institute where it's not really a focus from any weekend to the other. You know, NLC is one intensive weekend per month. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like for 2021 with COVID, you know, towards the end of the session. But the capstone is probably my most favorite part of the whole Institute. It's where every person picks one thing that they're particularly passionate about or that they want to set as a goal for themselves, and they tackle that. And they get support from their peers. You're divvied up into smaller subsets in your cohort to have people who will help you, you know, kind of work through the issues that you have through whatever your topic is and work through it to be successful. So Josie had support from her cohort to make sure that she identified some steps she needed to take in order to be successful in that project. And they do range the gamut from being incredibly serious and very important like Josie's to being a little bit sillier and lighthearted too. You know, we've started a like fully gender neutral and gender equal ultimate frisbee league. My project, I brought kids to farms to learn more about, in an after school project to learn more about farming and outdoor education. And there were folks who were doing art projects and starting nonprofits and planning how to run for office and winning when they planned how to run for office. So there was a lot of really cool stuff that goes on, but it spans the gamut. And a lot of people use it as an opportunity to kind of springboard into whatever they think might be an effective next step for their professional development. And Nicolette and Sierra might be talking about that too, but I just wanted to focus on that for one moment because I think it's just so important. So without further ado, Nicolette.
Hello. Yeah, so this is me again, Nicolette. I live here in Dover, but when I did the class, I was in Salisbury, which is a little bit north of Concord. And at that time, I considered myself to be part of kind of the edge of the Red Lakes, as I would call it, because it's a very conservative area. And when I was asked / harassed into applying to NLC by a few. It wasn't just Josie. She was smiling and shrugging, but she wasn't the only one. It was definitely part of it was folks who were talking about the people that I would connect with, and that wore me down. Like I was like, okay, I'll check this out. Who are we talking about? So for me, my background for work, I'm a landscaper, garden designer. I volunteer with an organization called Rights and Democracy. For me specifically, that's in education justice and education equity, ensuring that our kids, no matter where they are in New Hampshire, that they have access to the best education that we can provide. And when I was doing that work, I was finding myself repeatedly standing at podiums and somehow got roped into doing a press conference and all of these things that I didn't really, I'm not trained for. I didn't go to college. I certainly haven't studied how to be like a political science major or anything like that. And so when people are like, oh, you should really do this, I think you'd be really good for it, I found myself I think falling into that trap that a lot of women fall into, where you have to be asked repeatedly to step up to do the thing that you're actually already doing. And so what I found in joining NLC was getting a group of people who, first of all, helped build me up, who continued to say like, yeah, you know what you're talking about. You're decent at this. This is good. You can keep doing this. Like you can, you know, Josie, yeah, decent, you know, okay. And that, that it's okay to not know every answer to every question as long as you're trying and as long as you are trying to do the best for your community. And that's really what people want. That's what leadership is. That's kind of what I took away from NLC. I would say that one of the things that I talked about when I applied was that I was interested in running for office. That is something that I'm still interested in doing. Having just moved across the state, I'm still figuring out what that means here in a new community, but I'm excited to figure that out. And I feel like NLC gave me the tools and the network, more importantly. So before I even moved here, I knew so many people. And because I talked to people in either the alumni group or from my own cohort, that I was like, hey, so I'm going to move. And they were like, oh, hey, so this is a great place. And you should, you know, I've gotten like restaurant recommendations, like those are silly things, but like also just like connecting me with other people in a totally new community makes it feel like this place is a home already, which is pretty exciting. And for my overall feelings about NLC is something that I would say I looked at. You know, our legislature here in New Hampshire is quite old. I reflect on that frequently, not only our state generally, but especially our legislature. And I feel that they don't necessarily look like us. They don't sound like us. They don't share our lived experiences. And that reflects in the policies that we see at the state level. And within NLC, I found kind of like the New Hampshire squad, I would call it, just a group of people who are fantastic and determined, who are working, who are already doing the work, or who are like Josie, just building something because of NLC and getting that like inspiration, or people who are still making plans, and I'm excited to support and like uplift what they're working on now or going forward in the next like few years as they like embark on the same kind of things. So I would say for me, the biggest thing that came out of it was the connection to the community as part of NLC.
Thank you so much, Nicolette. I loved you talking about finding out who you'll connect with. I know I mentioned kind of generally speaking about the importance of the network that you can find by joining NLC. And I think that's true of joining a lot of different kinds of organizations. But what makes NLC particularly special, I think especially in New Hampshire, is that we're specifically looking to find people who are younger, who are looking to make the changes that we're looking to make, even if it's in a totally different industry, but are building the same skill sets because we want to make our communities the best they possibly can be from a variety of different lenses. And being a lifelong New Hampshireite and being from Sandown, Tara, so pretty close to your hometown in Danville, I remember graduating from college, coming back. I went to Keene, but I came back to my hometown and I was just really not sure of what my place was. And it took me a couple of years, like of kind of like professional and personal stagnation to figure out, what it was that I wanted to do. And a big part of that, I had started taking steps earlier to better myself and to better what it was and discovered that I wanted to do. But Sierra started reaching out to me. We worked together and she knew I was generally interested in being a more active member of my community, being civically engaged. And she also kind of just plugged away at me. And I think I probably got like 20 texts or phone calls over the course of like a year, just saying, hey, think about this. And I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. But as a lifelong New Hampshireite, finding that younger group of people who shared those values and were honestly like on fire. I mean, when I think about the other people who are speaking today, but like, everybody else, Josie motivates me every day. When I'm not doing something good for like my community, I'm like, damn, what would social activist Josie be saying? And that was a really, really, it's powerful for me because it's easy, especially, as a white man, to sit back and say, things are generally okay. And to think about the people who are actively out there on the front lines, which I'm not always on and don't always have to be on with my identity. It causes me to just be a lot more aware of that and to, I think, be a better person in general. But also to be a better progressive and a better ally to everybody else out there in New Hampshire. And it's just an incredibly powerful network. So I'm sorry for rambling on, but Nicolette, that was a great thing to latch onto. And it's a huge and powerful network here in the state that's growing every year as the cohort grows. Nicolette, before we pass to Sierra, and because you were in the 2020 cohort, I just want to mention, can you talk for like 30 seconds about what happened when you went virtual, not necessarily the COVID pandemic, but like how those institutes were facilitated and what that experience was like?
So we got to start our cohort in person, and then partway through, we had to transition on the fly to a virtual program. I will say that our facilitator did a great job stepping up to the plate on that because it provided some serious logistical challenges when they had up till then been trying to, line up like the places where you would go physically meet. And now that was no longer a reality. And I would say in some ways, I found it frustrating. For me personally, I really thrive in a in-person social environment, and I was pretty like bummed to have to move to the virtual. However, what it gave us access to was, I think, a much stronger connection to the national group because we were involved in some like really big meetings that were with like way more diverse groups. Like we did one and like I was like, oh my gosh, we're like the only white people. That's so exciting. Like that's so weird. But like that it was like exciting to see in certain, groups that like you get to, recognize that. And it gave us, I think, an opportunity to have these really great chats with folks. I remember talking to a young man from like Arkansas, and like we were just talking about, such similar issues with education that they're dealing with there. And so it was really almost like a preview of what the like annual like national convention for NLC is like, because we had such an opportunity to meet and mingle with progressives from across the country. So it had its ups and it had its downs, but I'd say overall, it was pretty cool to connect with folks across the country.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And, Sean and Sam are our curriculum chairs for the 2021 Institute. So they might have some details that they'll share, and I'll give you both time if you want to talk about the curriculum before the end of the session. But just broadly speaking, so you have the bold strokes of what's planned for 2021 NLC is because of COVID, we're planning to be fully remote for the 2021 Institute. And I think that offers, like Nicolette said, pros and cons. And they'll talk to those details at a little bit more length, but there's a couple things that I do think are pretty exciting about that. National being one of them. And my understanding, and again, Sam and Sean can elaborate in a moment, is that there will be elements that are state specific where you'll be working just within your cohort, and then there will be elements, basically half and half, where national's helping to facilitate and really make sure that you have a broader understanding about what's going on at a national level. And honestly, we did not get that prior to COVID. It was entirely about statewide organizing. And because New Hampshire is relatively small, and we live pretty close, I was always really curious to know what Boston was up to and what the Maine and Vermont chapters were up to. I think especially in New England, it's really important to think about, regionally, how should we be interacting as progressives and supporting one another interstate? Because, where we live on the seacoast, I can drive to Maine in 10 minutes, I can drive to Massachusetts in 10 minutes. And so what happens in those states matters to me. And it's really cool. I think that will be a neat aspect. Also, that weekend intensive that Sean and Sam will detail out a bit more, as much information as they can share right now, it's still being worked out, is that typically it's 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and we're trying to make sure that nobody is staring at a screen, without breaks from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. A lot of us are already doing that from our day-to-day, so they're going to make it as engaging and interactive as possible. And again, Sam and Sean, I promise I'll give you time to discuss that a little bit at the end, once Sean's had just a little bit more birthday champagne, so you can be spicy about it. All right, so Sierran is going to be our last speaker for this session today. I'm probably going to tag team since we actually work together, but we do very different roles. I'm going to let her speak first, and then I'm going to launch in a little bit, maybe just to piggyback off of why NLC was helpful for me in the education sector. So Sierran, you go ahead and I'll put myself on mute.
Great. I mean, I could talk forever about how NLC has impacted me, so I will do my best to do like the short version, but if people have questions after or anything like that, I'm more than happy to connect further. But my background is in education. I have been working in education. I was thinking about this before, just in the half an hour leading up to this meeting, I was like, wow, how long have I been working in education? Since 2003, turns out. Some of that was part-time or substitute teaching, things like that, but I have been actively working in education for 17 years, which makes me a little bit nervous to think about. So my time in working in education has been kind of runs the gamut. I've done everything from preschool through college. My most recent experience, so for the past 12, 13 years, I've worked in higher education in many different capacities. I could go into all of that, but I guess I don't really have to. So I, for the last 6 years, have been an academic advisor for online undergraduate students at Southern New Hampshire University. So I work with students all over the globe, mostly all over the United States, but I've had, students in many other countries, which has been really cool. But yeah, definitely throughout the United States, our students are tend to be non-traditional, so the average age is somewhere around 35. So mostly working adults with many other, things going on in their lives: jobs, kids, other jobs, other kids, lots of things. So that's what I do professionally, and progressive values in education in any capacity, I think, are very important. But I think, specifically in working at a nonprofit in higher education right now, particularly just because I think we have a unique experience. Even before COVID, I think working somewhere as innovative as SNHU is really cool, and there's a lot of different ways that progressive values kind of like speaks to that. Thinking about how the field of higher education is changing, and that is definitely going to be, kind of escalated by COVID, I think is, you know, things are going to change a lot faster than they already were. But the fact that we have the opportunity to be very agile with that is really cool. One of the ways professionally too, just like as a side note, that I've gotten more involved, like since my NLC experience, has been with our collective bargaining unit. So similar to a union, I've been taking a little bit more of an active role in that, and in, you know, working directly with them to tell them what I need as a professional and what other people who work with us need, and just kind of like demanding things, which is kind of cool. I think a lot of that has to do with confidence, and a lot of that is something that I gained through my time in NLC. So some of the other stuff that I do just like outside of work, work to me is work. Like, I like it, it's great, but it's a job, and you know, 40 hours a week, and then I go off and I do the other things that I like to do. Most of that is NLC related at this point. Prior to that, you know, I was like Josie mentioned, a volunteer lead for Planned Parenthood. That's how I found out about NLC, actually. So that was really cool. But being able to organize in those ways, being an activist, this network is truly beneficial for that. I think back to, you know, a couple of months ago when the Black Lives Matter movement was really coming up, and you know, lots of protests and rallies and organizing around that cause. NLC folks showed up, which I thought was really, really cool. So there are just a number of different ways to get involved, like based on that network. But I will just quickly also talk a little bit about my NLC experience specifically. So I did NLC in 2018 with Sam, and I think that's it in this meeting right now. But Sam and I have since become very good friends and now colleagues on the board, which has been really fun. I think that my NLC experience, like, it's very hard for me to come up with the right words to describe it. I met some of my very best friends from doing NLC 2 years ago when I was 33 years old, and you know, you might have all of your friends that you will ever have by that point, but I was very lucky to have 20 additional friends who I can call, text, message at any point for anything that I need or want, and they will all be there no matter what, even the ones that I'm least close to. We all have that experience in common, which I think is the really cool thing about NLC. So if you're working on a project like Josie doing the abortion fund, it's really easy to reach out to the NLC network and ask for support. And there's so many people with so many different experiences and backgrounds. So people with comms, you know, who've done comms in the past, or people who maybe are a little bit more like seasoned in life and have funds available that they can help donate or help get you started with something that, you know, you're working on. And more than that, just a lot of voices to share what you're working on through social media or just like word of mouth, people telling their friends. So I think that that's really the biggest benefit of doing NLC. Once I finished my institute, I joined the board. I was the mentorship co-chair for a year, and then I moved into the co-director role about a year ago. So I'm going to stay on for another year as co-director. So I will have done that for 2 years. But I think that this has been my favorite NLC experience to date, because it's just given me a really good view into how NLC works at the national level as well, because Rachel and I are really the liaisons between national and the New Hampshire chapter. So, you know, making sure that everything in New Hampshire runs properly, which is a little bit of a big job, but it's also really rewarding to see it from start to finish every year. So from this point, right, is the beginning recruitment, and then we go through selections, and then institute and fundraising, and to be able to be one of the people facilitating all of that throughout the year is definitely really rewarding, and to be connected to folks at the national level or other chapters throughout the country doing the same thing is also really cool. Just one quick example, last year when the shooting in El Paso happened, we have 5 chapters in Texas. So one of them is basically, it's South Texas Frontera, so it's like the opposite side of Texas, but like on the Texas-Mexico border. So they felt a very big sense of familiarity, like with the El Paso area, right? So when that happened, we connected with our South Texas friends and offered whatever support we could. It might not have been much, but it was a way for us to be there for our like progressive community, our NLC community from across the country. And I think that that's just really meaningful. So just as one example. But I think that's it. That's probably where I'll stop. I could talk literally forever about all of this. So
we have that in common.
Yeah.
And
we're the same personality type, we found out last night.
We just took
too.
the Enneagram. I didn't actually know that happened with Texas Frontera. That's very cool. I want to touch on some things very quickly that Ciaran brought up. I, for the sake of time, won't share too much about my own story, but I have done a lot of DEI work in leadership at SNU. I'm a dean there, and I've managed to secure about $20,000 in grants due to some of the training that NLC has offered, and that's all directly going back to supporting DEI and underrepresented student retention for our students, as well as opportunities for diversity and equity training for our staff. And that was really excellent. You know, long story short, NLC gave me the skills I needed in order to be the most successful professional I could in my environment. I knew I wanted to stick in education. Maybe someday I'll run for office. Probably not, honestly. What I'm more interested in is making sure that the issue I care about most is really supported here at my work, but also now as a campaign, issue-based campaign that I care about. So when we hear from groups like Rights and Democracy or the New Hampshire Youth Movement, those are the groups that I want to support and have the skills to be as effective as possible in doing so. Okay, so Ciaran mentioned a bunch of things that I want to reference, and then I'm going to turn the board quickly over to Sam and Sean, and then we're going to open it up to you all for questions. So Ciaran mentioned professional mentors, and we haven't gotten to that yet. In addition to the Institute Weekends for Training and the Capstone Project, you will each individually be paired, if you're accepted, with a professional mentor about halfway through your institute. And those mentors are people who you help us to match with, but we do as a part of the training. So because education was my issue, for example, I said I wanted to work with a senior leader at the state policy research level because I'm really interested. I'm studying law and policy for a doctoral degree right now. And I was really interested in legal issues surrounding education and access. They paired me with the executive director of the New Hampshire School Boards Association. Like, it couldn't have been better for me. And I got a really, really excellent primer on what I could do to be like a better legal advocate for this, as well as understand some critical steps I could take towards advancing my career in that direction. And similarly, a lot of the mentors who are out there, you know, they'll be from all different walks of life, and you get to help influence that. There are some people who want peers who are in the exact same place as them just to kind of help to collaborate. There are some people who said, I really only want to work with like a senior citizen who is at the, you know, the end of their career because I want to see what the lifespan of this career field might look like for me. And then there are people who are not necessarily looking for mentors, but are looking for, you know, just an additionally powerful networking guide for the industry that they're interested in joining into. Or supporting a campaign. Like Ciaran had a state rep. I don't know anybody else's mentors off the top of my head, but it's a powerful opportunity as well that I just didn't want to pass up. Ciaran also mentioned what the national picture looks like. So we have 7 full-time staff members here for NLC at the national level. The entire organization other than that is volunteer run. There are national directors, there are national chairs, all volunteer. They've all gone through this process. Nobody has, been brought in from the outside without being involved as a fellow. It's also free. So if you haven't already applied and you're considering doing so, you have to spend $25 to submit your application fee. That can actually get waived too. If you feel like that cost might be prohibitive, please just let me know and I'll make sure you get the link to the scholarship application. We've never, ever denied anybody a financial need-based scholarship, and I'm more than happy to make sure that you get that. Additionally, there is a $200 deposit if you're accepted to NLC, but that is fully refundable at the end of your term of service. Basically, the reason that we have that deposit is because the training itself is worth about $1,500 in value. Typically, we're not doing that this particular element this year because it's virtual, but typically we fly people in from all over the country to make sure that certain elements of the training are facilitated by people who are really formally trained in issues like, identity development and, emotional training and facilitation. So that way you can really, break down a little bit about what it is that you're trying to get out of NLC. They still have those professional trainers and they're bringing them in. At the end, as long as you complete every Institute weekend, because that's all we really care about, and you can get that refunded, or you can choose to donate it and pay it forward to the future class. So for you all, it would be the 2022 cohort. There is a selections timeline that I just want to cover so I don't forget it. If you haven't applied yet, applications are due on September 3rd. You still got plenty of time, but it is coming up fast, so keep that in mind. And then we have final selection notifications due by October 29th to national. So interviews, application reviews, all of that happens from mid-September through mid-October, and you'll hear about our decisions usually, a little bit before then, but by October 29th at the absolute latest, and the Institute starts in January. All right, those are all of my notes. I do want to turn, I know that we're getting close to time. We still have a few minutes. I really want to give Sam and Sean, because I promised a couple of minutes just to talk about the curriculum and any changes that they think they're really excited about. It's important. So yeah, take it away.
Okay, so just to kind of quickly go over what curriculum and institute with NLC looks like. So NLC is designed to be a training program for progressive activists, and it's a very broad sense of what that term means, because that could be in your professional life, your community, or whether or not you're involved in politics, but it's designed to kind of give you skills just to strengthen the role you play in your community with however that looks like for you. From January through May, 1 weekend a month is going to be, we call it an Institute weekend, but that's where we hold sessions. Used to be in person, but currently it's going to be virtual just to adjust for COVID. And each weekend has a theme based around a certain skill set, and that can be communications, financing and fundraising, management, whether that's for a nonprofit, volunteer, campaigning, diversity, equity, inclusion. And then there's a weekend we call Lead Weekend, which stands for Life Entrepreneurship and Development, which mainly serves so people can take an assessment of their own personal life, their skill sets, their values, and center that around the goals they want to have moving forward. During the weekend, there's some sessions we have where we practice more hard skills, and by that I mean like basics on public speaking, how to do a hard ask if you're fundraising, for example. The lighting is changing in my room very drastically. And also I would say some soft skills, because one of the main goals of this program is we're getting together 15 to 20 people in New Hampshire who are very passionate about what they do and are doing cool work. So we want to give people a chance to connect with each other, talking about what leadership looks like to them, what communication looks like to them, and their best practices. We are part of a national program and a state-specific chapter of that. So we do have people from the national organization come to present to us. We have people come to present about strategic communication and digital outreach. but we also have a lot of state-specific trainers come, just because obviously things in New Hampshire are going to be different than how they are over on the overall country. So we want to have people who can come and talk to you about, if you're interested in politics in New Hampshire, this is what our scene looks like, because New Hampshire is going to be very different than even Massachusetts. And we have people who come in who own small businesses, and there's going to be a lot of different segments of that. For example, like we had people Shoshana Kelly, who runs a small business in New Hampshire, came in to talk about advertising, and she had people partner in groups and practice creating a strategic message when you have an audience in mind. And there's going to be a lot of different sessions, and it can be applicable to people to a certain degree, because not everyone is going to have the same background or professional interests, but the goal is to give people skill sets that can be applied in their specific lives for their specific goals and missions. So there's going to be those 5 weekends, and there's a chance and opportunity to foster a real sense of community amongst each other that's going to continue beyond those 5 sessions. And as mentioned, there's a mentorship that goes beyond that, and as well as a capstone project, which is your own specific passion or project that you're working on within NLC. Okay, yeah, those were my quick notes about some of what NLC entails.
Thank you, Sam, for really covering some of the Institute weekends. I'm glad those got highlighted. Sean, do you want to pop in?
Will say hello and probably echo most of what Sam said. But to kind of pull up some of the comments, especially Rachel's, like, the curriculum is really well thought out. It's intentional and it's very translatable. Like, I think about the kind of management weekend we had, and we had one of the presentations was on the idea of campaign management. And one thing I would say, and kind of really took away from that, was like, these are skills that are like, yes, it's framed in the concept of a campaign, like an issue-oriented political kind of advocacy piece, but it's like, I was sitting here, I'm a lawyer, that's my life and profession, but I was like, this is translatable to preparing a case for trial. You walk in knowing, what do I want in the outcome, and here are all the steps I have to go through to get there. It's all of the skills are kind of interrelated like that. Even the example we have with Shoshana, it's advertising, but it's really strategic communications. It's how do you frame a message with an audience in mind? It's not, how do I advertise myself? And so it's one of those, like, the skills that are developed are so excellent in that way that you can take the principles you learn and apply them in almost any aspect of what you do. And so, or what you hope to do. So that is, I think, the one thing I would really kind of really want to lift up with the aspect of the skills that are developed. And one thing I also kind of highlight with New Hampshire specific, I mean, it's not, the skills you learn aren't kind of geared around, how do I run for a political office? It's very kind of broad based. So I know, like, there are a lot of people who are here because they're interested in politics or are politics adjacent, but that's not, like, if that's not your thing, or that's not your goal, that's not what the issues you're developing, like, that's not kind of what the focus is either. So it's really kind of applicable, as a lot of folks have said, in so many different aspects of life and so many different careers.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, so that's actually a really great segue just to mention next week's event before opening up the floor to questions, that if any of you are also interested in running for office, we do have a specific event next Wednesday from 6:30 to 7:30 that talks about, from elected officials who are also NLC alum here in New Hampshire. We've got some on the Seacoast, some from Central New Hampshire, some from Nashua, who are all going to be speaking about how some of the skills that they gained in NLC helped them for a successful campaign before running for office, as well as some of the folks who had actually been elected before joining NLC really feel like they benefited and wish they had had that during their first campaign and had a much more effective second campaign. So if you're interested in running for office, that's something just to keep your eye out on. I'll have invitations out to each of you by the end of the week. But now I know we're at time, but we will be here. So do you want to take yourselves off mute and ask us questions? Because we're happy to answer.
Yeah, so I have a quick question. So is it like you do a weekend and then you don't really talk to anybody until the next month and there's like another training, or is there like stuff in between so that you're kind of connected to your cohort?
That's a great question. Sam, do you want to answer that?
Yes, so absolutely. And I would say this, like one weekend, which is I don't want to say mandatory content, but that's mandatory content. But the program is designed and it's built into it that you're going to be connecting and talking to people in between that. Part of that is just the fact that these communities and cohorts tend to bond very quickly. But there's also going to be typically, especially in the upcoming year, a lot more trainings and programming and content in between the weekends, as well as discussion and, for example, call times that happen between people. I know last year we had a very active cohort that was in pretty constant communication between the weekends. And that also continues beyond the program. So definitely I would say the weekend is going to be where it's the most intensive in terms of their time and talking to each other, but the community and the engagement is going to be throughout the entire months of the Institute.
I will just add on to that briefly. Everything Sam said is spot on. It's a lot of it is going to be up to the cohort, like whatever you want, which is kind of a nice part about NLC too. But the way, without giving too much away, because I wouldn't want to do that, the way that NLC is designed is so lead weekend is the first weekend, and that is like a cohort building, community building, bonding, self-development, community development type of a retreat style weekend. And what that does is it breaks down barriers and it allows you to get to know people fast and bond with them fast in order to be able to have difficult conversations for the rest of the 5-month institute, which is really cool and unique, and I've never experienced that anywhere else. So I think that that's just a kind of a testament to kind of like how it unfolds. And yeah, like as Sam said, there are like subgroups and ways that you will be able to connect obviously in between too.
I want to pass it off to other questions, but the subgroups that Ciaran and Sam mentioned are actually organized by the curriculum chairs, and they're effectively folks. I'm not sure if they're always organized this way. When Josie and I went through it, they tried to do it regionally. So that way you were physically close so you could meet in person regularly. It might not always be the same, but you're intentionally paired with people who can help you to progress those goals. And my subgroup, my lead group, we ended up meeting like once a month on top of everything just to have dinner and talk a little bit about where our capstones were at and kind of keep each other accountable. It was really nice. And we all had very different projects and goals. So it was nice to hear about that. And they asked really probing questions that I probably wouldn't have addressed or addressed as in timely a manner as I did had I not had those opportunities to network. And I think I'll use Josie's case as an example. Like such a large project like the abortion fund took time. And I think the feedback from the alumni that she's had contact with constantly about this has been really significant. Josie, I hope it's okay that I'm speaking for you here, has been really significant in making sure that she's as successful as she can be in that arena, which is, it's just exciting. All right, I want to let other folks ask questions.
I actually do have a question. So somebody mentioned earlier that January through May, there are those weekly sort of skill building cohort meetings. Does that mean that June through whenever is really more of a capstone focus? How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And this is something where the exact dates might be a little bit different, and it's a little different every year. But yes, January through May is designed to be those kind of core skill set building weekends. Then we always have, for example, like a fundraiser that happens June or July. That's a culmination of the fellows' work. I know this year we had a big capstone presentation. We called it the graduation ceremony in June, where it was people presenting their capstones. And we also have a lot of programs such as mentorship, which typically doesn't even begin until after the skill set weekends are complete. So that happens typically always after May. or starting in May, depending on what's going on. And then there's also just then the alumni engagement and curriculum and just cohort community bonding that happens beyond May as well. Because the program really is designed so there's 5 months of curriculum and then the NLC alumni experience, which will continue beyond that.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And Laura, I want to elaborate on that, like Sam says, that formal training ends in May. Then you'll have your capstone presentation, typically June, July, as well as a graduation fundraiser event. And again, the reason for the fundraiser, just so you have the context, is that because NLC itself, the training is covered, we try and always pay it forward by fundraising for the next class or for new chapters that are being developed around the country. Another thing that Sam mentions is that the mentorship goes on and the alumni activity goes on. That mentorship relationship lasts as long as you want it to. So once you've been paired, we ask that folks have a couple of initial meetings and that the mentors are willing to commit to that for at least a set period of time. I had a really interesting relationship with my mentor because I wasn't quite, I was like a year too early to start talking with him. So actually right before COVID hit, and I had been finished with my institute for over a year at that point, he and I reconnected and we've been talking a lot. He helped me with a bit of basic guidance around what doctoral degree I wanted to study. And we were supposed to grab lunch a bunch of times this summer and kept pushing it back for COVID. But so we reconnected and it's been over a year. And I think it's actually more fruitful now than it was at the start of NLC. And the other note just about alumni engagement is New Hampshire is a relatively new chapter. So our alumni engagement throughout the year is still in development. And that's really what each of us chooses to make it. I think that we're really fortunate to have an amazing, kind of crazy, but amazing alumni director this year. Her name's Erin. She's not here tonight because she hasn't taken vacation in like 3 years. So she's driving to Maine. But she is incredible and is planning a lot of events over the next year to start building up our alumni base of activities and engagement. So that way, when we do get together, we get together more purposefully and more regularly. I hope that's helpful.
And I would
I
add,
just want to add, NLC has come so far over the years since it first started here in New Hampshire. My partner was actually in the very first NLC class, and there was no mentorship, and like the speakers weren't like the most inspiring. And every single year they've just taken all the feedback they've gotten and they've worked harder and harder every single year to make it better and better. So honestly jealous of anyone who gets to be in it next year, because I'm sure it will be even better. And I just have continued to see it grow and take feedback super well. So yeah, excited for y'all to get to see it improve even more.
and one thing on the capstone, so it is, I would kind of lift up Rachel's comment. It's something you're working on kind of through the institute, so it's kind of a thing of software, but it's not something that, it's not a project that necessarily ends at the end of institute. So some people's are, they are kind of discrete, closed off, like I can finish this in a few months. Some of them are kind of, like Josie's, she's still working on it and it's been, it's been over a year. So, they can be something that extends well into the future. Some of it is, if you're at the point kind of, do I want to go to grad school or am I changing careers? Like kind of just developing a plan for yourself about what you want your life to look like, what you want your career path to look like. Others could be a specific project. I know, I had doing names blanking, Chris from a couple years ago, his was kind of like converting his condominium development to a recycling program. And so he actually was able to finish that very quickly because he started kind of the action items really early on, and it completed that by the end of the institute. But it's not a kind of a necessarily discrete, by a certain point of time you have to be so far along. Or anything like that. And some people, they evolve beyond what they started with. You start with, oh, I'm gonna work on this. Hey, let me take this and take it like 3 steps further because I really enjoyed it.
Thanks, John. All right, Tara, Laura, and Ryan. Again, we're not going anywhere. Do you have more questions? No? Okay.
Actually, I do. So
Okay.
the fundraising thing that you said also happens in addition to the capstone. Like, if people have never done fundraising, like, how is that measured in terms of if you're successful at it or not?
Yeah,
That's an awesome
I can
question.
speak to that if you want. just because I love the fundraiser so much. When I was a fellow, I was like our fellow fundraising lead, and you know, have just been fundraising ever since, I guess. So basically what happens is we teach you those skills. So you're not expected to know anything about fundraising when you start. I didn't when I did NLC. I might have helped with some fundraising like through advocacy or something like that, but I never had like led on any fundraising or did any like call time or anything like that really too much in the past. So what we do is part of an institute weekend, or typically a full institute weekend. Things are still in flux, you know, switching to virtual, but is teaching those skills. So we'll go through all of that. There will be lots of practice, and then you'll put your practice to work. You will, you know, work through your network and use your network to fundraise, and we will help you with all of that. But that's something that we do all together as a chapter. So it's not something you do on your own. It's something that you do with your cohort, and also with us on the board and some alumni who like to join in every now and then as well to help with call time. And we do our best to make it fun, because it is something that you know, can be a little bit scary because it's new for a lot of people, but it truly is a really valuable skill. I've been able to use it, you know, not just with NLC, but in doing some other outside work as well since Institute, but we really do try to set you up with all of the skills that you'll need and support that you need as well. I hope that helps.
I'm just gonna piggyback. So I was also the fundraising chair for my group, and I do not like asking people for money. Fundraising was something that I was anxious about then, and I was like, well, because Sierra told me I had to, might as well throw myself in the deep end. And I did. And you know what? I will say that there are elements of that fundraiser that I still can't say I entirely enjoyed. But you need to know how to do that if you really want to be effective as a progressive community leader for whatever it is that you care about. Like, I don't like making phone calls and asking like family or friends for money. But what I learned from that was, how could I do that more effectively? So I figured out how to write grants. I figured out how to ask for donations from targeted big donors. So it made me really think about like how to be more effective. So I didn't have to go and like call my mom or call like my aunts and uncles when I was like, hey, there's an education cause I care about. It gave me the skills that I needed in order to actually like work out a solution for myself. And that has been paying dividends for a long time, because now when I have fellows call me every year and ask for donations, I will give a donation because it's good practice and I care about NLC. But I also think that it is really, really high impact, because everybody who's calling has a different cause they care about. And even though they're fundraising for NLC, I view it as a way to like pay it forward and expand my network tenfold, because if, you know, my $10 trickles down in some way to help somebody else who's going to raise $100,000 or start the first abortion fund. So proud of Josie. She's been talking about it for years. Like, I get jazzed when I talk about it, but like, you're going to start something that important for the state. Of course, of course. But Josie needs to have those skills. We all need to have those skills. So yeah, I was pretty uncomfortable, and it was still like a really high reward activity for me. Thanks, Yaron. All right, what else? I saw some head shakes before. You guys can change your minds though. So I'll give like a quiet count of 5 here. All right, I'm seeing smiles. I'm not seeing anybody like jump to come off mute, and we're over time. So I will bring this meeting to a close. This has been a really excellent chat with all of you. We have enjoyed doing this. We've had a couple of them already, but it's also really nice. I thank you to the speakers tonight who really shared a bit of their personal stories and their journey through NLC. I hope that that was helpful to you all who are considering applying. I really, really am grateful to have you here, because without you applying to NLC and thinking about the trainings that it is that you need for your own personal endeavors, we're not going to get the New Hampshire that I want to see in my lifetime, and I know that the other alumni really want to see. And it really is nice. You can use this to apply it to whatever it is that you care about. And anybody can go out and develop those skills, but this is just such an awesome opportunity. I can't speak highly enough to it. So I hope you consider. And if you've got questions, you definitely have my email and my cell phone number. It's my personal line, so call at any time if you've got more questions during the application and selections process. I'm not going to be really involved with the selections because didn't want to have a conflict of interest there, but I'm more than happy to talk about it because it's a cool process, it's interesting, and I know that anybody else on the board who's here, I'm pointing at you all like you're on my screen. They'd be happy to help too. So without much further ado, thank you, applicants and nominees and speakers. It's been great to have you all here today. And hopefully we'll be seeing you in the next couple of weeks at other events and see your applications roll in. Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Aw, this is nice.
Bye.
Bye.